What's up, fellow geeks, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all the ships at sea? It is I, your grumpy guide to all things gaming, the toxic gatekeeper, the face with no trace, the OGGM with another OGGM adventure. So finally, let us take a look at this 5-room dungeon idea. A lot of individuals have taken claim for the idea, blah, blah, blah. And it's not really an idea. It's just sort of like a way of looking at dungeon design, adventure design, that your typical 3-4 hour session, whether it be a one shot or part of a campaign or whatever, technically usually can be broken down into like 5 encounters, you know, and it's kind of also just sort of a tip on story writing. There's 5 things are happening in the story at some point, um, and you can just break it down to, encounter or door. Everything is an encounter. Everything else is a door. A door is something that stands in between encounter A and encounter B, and that encounter does not have to be combat. My lips look weird today, or am I just hallucinating things? Like the encounter doesn't have to be a fight. It just has to be anything that requires input and interaction and some level of problem solving. And if it's not an encounter, then it's a door. It's something that stands in between the encounter. And a door is not necessarily a door. A door is just time, distance, something that impedes the encounters, something that stands in the way from the encounter. Doesn't have to be a bad thing. Eating a sandwich could be a door. It's a pause in the action. The encounters are the action. The doors are the pauses in between the action, the trip on the road, or an actual door. So floating around for a while has been this sort of like idea, philosophy, whatever, of just sort of breaking down the build of this story, of the adventure, of the whatever you're going to call it, and that there's inevitably usually about 5 things that happen, and that you can tell an adventure in 5 rooms. And if you need a short emergency adventure because they don't go the direction you want them to go, you can just have this 5 thing ready sitting to the side, and that's where also that, random tables are just so great because you can just instantly roll a few things and go put them together and go, okay, here's a 5-room, whatever. And that, beginning, middle, and end of the story could all be told in about 5 scenes, 5 encounters, 5 rooms. And usually the 5-room kind of breaks down to something like this. And there are alternatives because, why does the big bad have to be in the last room? Why can't the big bad be in the first room and everything else be consequences of the encounter with the big bad? So, but generally it's kind of this, and it's very linear, it's very railroady, but that's sort of the point because you want to keep the individuals in the story sort of on a track. I mean, you want to give them the illusion that they can do whatever they want, but generally you kind of want the story to sort of stay on a track, and you want to be able to, as we've said before, adapt to whatever they do. So, if they don't go where you want them to go, you just change what was supposed to happen to wherever they are going. So again, this sort of idea that there's just these 5 things that I can sort of put together to make a really quick adventure. And it sort of breakdowns like this. So, a dungeon is sort of the best example of this. But again, a dungeon just means self-enclosed environment. It doesn't actually have to be a dungeon, a hole in the ground. It just dungeon just means you have very limited options. Can't really wander off this series of events. It could be a wilderness, it could be a building, it could be a spaceship. It could be an actual dungeon. It could be a building. It doesn't matter. Dungeon in this terminology, this whatever we're talking about, words are hard. It just means the protagonists, the characters, don't have a lot of options other than these 5 rooms. So room number 1, an entrance. Let us go into the dungeon, and usually you're going to have something, an encounter of some kind in the room. It could be and the 2 options are some type of sort of, this is a hint of what's to come trap, or this is a hint of what's to come combat. So you might have, some lower level underlings of the big bad, or it could actually just be the big bad. I have at least one 5 room where the very first encounter is the big bad, and everything after is the consequences of that big bad. But generally it's the entrance, whatever the introduction, and the first encounter in this first room, room number 1 of these 5 rooms, is something to give you a hint of the shape to come. So it could be a trap themed to the other 4 rooms, or more likely than not, it's some kind of combat with lesser versions of whatever the big bad at the end is. So if the big bad is a Bandit Lord Steve, why not? Then whatever you run into the first room are going to just be sort of, Bandit Lord Steve's lesser dudes, lower level versions of Bandit Lord Steve to sort of give the players a hint of what's going on, give them an incentive to keep exploring into room number 2, and, give them a little blood pumping. Like, let's start the session with this fight right off. Bam, here's these guys and you got to deal with them. Then we go into room 2. Okay, so room 2 is a break from room 1 and room 3. Because something's going to happen in room 3, and obviously probably something's happening in room 5. So room 2 is sort of a break. So room 2, you either want to be a trap or a role-playing experience, something where they get to use the non-combat skills and do some problem solving, and use. We've spent all these points and we put all these things and these spells and these weird and these things and these. I've got shadow weaving at rank 23, and I've got whatever underwater basket weaving at 12, and I don't know. So here's either a chance to do some role playing with an NPC or throw in a trap. And again, if it's a trap, then it's a trap to give you a hint of what's going on. So a good one would be like a gate, because then, and there's something on the other side of the gate that they have to use their skills to figure out. They can't just bash whatever room 2 is. So room 2, a good one is a gate or a drawbridge or maybe a pit in the ground. One of mine has a big pit in the ground that you can't fight a pit. You got to figure out clever ways to get to the other side of the pit that doesn't involve just hitting things. So room 2 is a thought experiment, a chance to role play, a chance to explore my character and explore the world of this 5-room dungeon, because room 3 is going to be another fight of some kind. Room 3 is probably going to be either guards to the big bad who's in room 4, or again, another fight. Again, to keep the story moving, to keep the combat going, to keep the blood pumping, to keep the peoples engaged. So it's going to be a fight. And the room 3 fight is going to be probably a little tougher than the room 1 fight. So if the room 1 fight is, low-level, incompetent, bubbling bandits, then the room 3 fight is going to be like a sergeant. And room 4 can either be another trap or something to delay the party, maybe another pit, maybe a puzzle, but definitely, again, this is a skill challenge usually. It's, again, a chance for the people who didn't get to swing a sword or cast a spell, the skill-based characters, the characters who have, spent more time on things like boat building, to actually get a chance to, again, shine and have their moment. So room 4, usually, again, a trap, something that delays time, a flood, maybe like the chamber slowly flooding, and to get to the big bad at 5, you got to do something to, whatever. Then 5 is the big bad and the treasure. Or 4 could be the big bad and 5 is the treasure, the reward. There's two ways to look at it. The most typical one is room 4 or encounter 4 is your big bad, and encounter 5 is your reward and your hint of what's next. So, okay, Or you could have room 4 be something that the big bad initiates, like a flooding or a rock slide or jets of fire or a giant rolling boulder. But you know that big bad is there because you've seen it. And then room 5 is the actual fight with the big bad and the rewards or the hints at what things to come. But generally room 4 is some type of action. And it's 50-50. A lot of people say room 4 is the big bad and room 5 is a reward. And the other half say room 4 can be another skill challenge, but make this more of a time-sensitive, deadly skill challenge. Like room 4 has to be on a timer. And it could be something that the bad guy activated in room 5 and make the players actually see it. Either way, there's a big bad. Usually, unless you're me and you put the big bad in the first room, your final room or your final thing is your big bad. So if room 1 and room 3 are lesser bandits, then the final thing in this 5 room is Bandit Lord Steve. And Bandit Lord Steve is going to be a tough enough fight that it requires at least 2 or 3 characters to take him out. He's the equivalent of the party. He is the reason why you're here, and the fight should last, 3 or 4 rounds, 5 rounds, 6 rounds if they're having bad rolls. But eventually, hopefully, they defeat Big Bad Steve, because really you don't want them running home and crying or killing people in just a 5-room dungeon. I mean, maybe you do, I don't know. But anyways, then there's a reward. There has to be a reward. There has to be something that says, job well done. It could be stuff, it could be experience, it could be information. And then, as an add-on, if this 5-room dungeon is something you want to use to either A, get them back on track to whatever they was, an individual who I was talking about 5-room dungeons said that they always have a stack of 5-room dungeons available, so if the player characters go off on some random tangent, they still have something for them to do, which is fine. That's part of the reason why these exist. But here's a chance at the end of room 5 to give some information about the world, give a clue about what's going on, maybe give a hint of what the next 5-room dungeon is or what you have planned next. So give them something, some kernel to hold on to, so when the next session happens, they're either been directed back to the path that you needed them to go on because of something in the 5-room, or they have a hint, some lore, whatever, to make them go, maybe we should look into this. But again, it breaks down 5 rooms, bam, first room, a fight. Second room, a skill challenge. Third room, a fight. 4th room, a tougher skill challenge, which could be the big boss. And 5th room, the reward, which could be guarded by the big boss. Either way. But the 5th room always ends with a reward, monetary reward, magic reward, experience reward, and maybe as a hook, also in room 5, there's the and then. Next episode, Steve the Bandit Lord's brother wants to avenge Steve the Bandit Lord, and he is held up in another 5-room dungeon you have to go to. I don't know, whatever. But you get the general idea. So when people are referring to this 5-room dungeon philosophy, it's basically just this, I can break down the adventure into a series of these 5 rooms, a series of these 5 things. And a dungeon, a big, huge, mega mountain of mega dungeonness and mega levels of mega whatever, can just be a series of 5 rooms that are interconnected. Introduction, skill challenge, fight, tougher skill challenge, big boss, reward, and then maybe a hook. Put 40 of those together and you've got the amazing mega cave of Mega Steve. I don't know. It could be. So, there you go. If you have been wondering what a 5-room dungeon is, there I have tried and probably failed to explain it to you and give you an example. And maybe we'll do a better example, an actual written out one in another video, but I think 15 minutes is long enough. You probably have something better to do. Remember, if you haven't subscribed yet, please, you still have time to help me reach 200 subs by August 4th. I've got some weird plans, including the long-awaited vending machine adventure, and I have now found out there's an arcade here in Ventura. So, if you want to see me waste tons of quarters losing at video games, that's another one that I'm dangling over you. So please take this moment to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and I'll talk to you losers later.